The world is full of tours. But you don't choose a Toyota truck to follow the beaten path. You choose it to find the places in between. The detours, where each adventure pulls you toward the next. And wrong turns turn out right. So why would you ever take a tour when you could take a detour? Toyota Trucks.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything.
I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Nippy Ames, and this is A Little Bit Culty.
We woke up from a cult, and that journey was captured in The Vow on HBO and in my memoir, Scarred.
Now, in this podcast, we break down the shame and secrets that make these experiences so destructive with honest conversations on how seemingly benign groups can cross into the cultiverse and how to spot and recover from trouble if it happens to you.
Each week, we bring in experts, survivors, and whistleblowers to explore red flags, resilience, and even share a few laughs because sometimes you gotta laugh.
Subscribe to our Patreon for early and ad-free listening, some live Q&A, and exclusive content at patreon.com/alittleBitCulty.
Welcome to Season 8 of A Little Bit Culty. Welcome back, everybody, to this very special episode of A Little Bit Culty.
There's a good chance some of you have seen the show Intervention, where a specialist tries to help people break free from addiction. But did you know they're interventionists for people in cults?
It's actually been a thing since the 70s, Nippy, though the methods have changed drastically over the years. Our guest today is Joe Szimhart, a consultant who specializes in all things culty, and he's been a cult interventionist for more than 40 years.
Joe's here to walk us through that process, from what goes into prepping for an intervention to post-intervention support. We'll get into the most effective methods for breaking through to someone who's been drawn into a high-control group,
including methods that loved ones can use. We all know how hard it is to talk someone out of a cult, and Joe will offer practical advice for approaching those conversations.
Hint, don't argue. When it comes to cults, Joe has decades of knowledge and experience. He has a plethora of knowledge with some incredible stories.
We knew that as soon as we started talking to him that this would definitely be a two-parter. Y'all, this is a treasure trove. Let's welcome Joe Szimhart to the show. Joe Szimhart, welcome finally to A Little Bit Culty.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and I've enjoyed your shows.
Great. Well, you've been in this space way longer than we have. You must have been like, who are these two young people coming into the cult space thinking they know what they're talking about?
Well, it's good to see the new energy that's come in, especially since the internet era. And there's been a new explosion of cults because of the internet era. And as a result, there's a better way to address it, which is online now. Of course, I started in this field before any of this was current. In 1980 was the first time I exit counseled someone from a cult.
Let's start there. Do you want to give us a brief, cliff notes of your cult experience?
Yeah, I could do that. People ask me that, how did you get into this field? And that's why I kind of wrote this memoir, Santa Fe Bill Tate and Me, that I published in 2020 that tells all that story. But briefly, I went to college in the late 60s and I did all that stuff, the acid, the protesting, I rebelled. I left engineering. I was in my junior year and I was doing pretty good in the courses. I was taking differential calculus of all things, and I decided to go into fine arts. And I kid about it, saying it happened because I took an acid trip and I changed my personality, but it was a lot more than that. The move into the fine arts was something that was just in me since I was a kid. My grandfather in Hungary was an amateur artist, and it always attracted me. So I got into what later interested me something called Theosophy, and it was a course I did on William Blake, an honors course. And he was a young man. The poet Blake was into the Swedenborg, Emanuel Swedenborg's religion, which Swedenborg called Theosophy. And that introduced me to that whole way of thinking of neo-Gnosticism and Blake's quirky poetry and all of that. Fast forward a bit, after art school, I decided to move to Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1975. And I got set up there. The first day I was there, I met this gallery owner. We became great friends, Bill Tate, and he ran kind of a mom and pop thing. And he had a couple of books in his gallery. One was a magazine, Artist in America, and it featured this character named Nicholas Roerich. And Nicholas and Helena Roerich, his wife, began something called the Agni Yoga Society, or the Teaching of Living Ethics, back in 1920. And they were students of Madame Blavatsky's teachings. Blavatsky, of course, lived from 1831 to 1891, and she was kind of like the godmother of this type of esoteric theosophy.
Yeah, we read about her in Hoodwinked, right?
Yeah, she's quite a character, Russian-based, was rebellious as a child, kind of a proto-feminist in her time, was already doing seances when she was 11 years old, impressing people with communicating with the dead. And she ran away from home, more or less. She was in an upper-class military-type family, and her mother was a writer. On her mother's deathbed, the mother said, "I'm afraid of what's going to happen to poor Helena," because Helena would have been, like in today's world, probably bipolar or something like a borderline personality type. And very precocious. She was good at horseback riding. She played piano. She could speak several languages. She could read with a photographic memory, and that type of person, but with this quirky personality. So she ended up wandering around and got into the esoteric occult worlds, reading the books of like Eliphas Levi and Pappas and Rosicrucianism and early Masonry and the Hermetic writings and, Egyptian mysteries and all that stuff. And she put it all together in something she called Isis Unveiled in the 1880s. And then she came out with The Secret Doctrine later, a few years before she died. She and Colonel Olcott started the Miracle Club in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania around 1874. And then in 1875, they changed it to the Theosophical Society. And they were investigating the perennial wisdom, the brotherhood of all religions, and trying to put that all together. And they mainly concentrated on Hinduism and Buddhism and the esoteric Western tradition, neo-Gnosticism. So Blavatsky was kind of anti-Christian in a way, and she promoted a form of esoteric Buddhism and whatever. But she was mainly known for channeling masters, and that she claimed were these adepts, these people that somehow could live in the ethers and appear in the body at will. Kuthumi, Moria, Dwakul, the Old Man of the Hills, and Comte de Saint-Germain. The only one that's historical there is Saint Germain. He actually lived. He died in the late 18th century, and he was called the mystery man of Europe, the man who would never die. He was around with Marie Antoinette and these other characters, and he was talented. He could write music. He could do alchemy, and to me, he was quite the con artist. He claimed he was 500 years old and all this BS. But he lived and died during the 18th century.
And she channeled him.
She channeled his work, one of her masters.
And then she was the sort of godmother of the people that you eventually joined.
Right, of this whole system of teaching that I call the theosophical things. So I'm in Santa Fe, and I come across the Agni Yoga Society, which is a spin-off of that. And also this book called The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall, who had the Philosophical Research Society in California. And he was also a disciple of Rosicrucianism and Blavatsky and the esoteric tradition and Pythagorean teachings and all of that stuff. He was also a fringe Freemason. So I read that book. And then the same day I met this guy who introduced me to his uncle in Santa Fe, who owned this building, this big white building that had been owned by the I Am activity cult. And the uncle later hired me I was a handyman as well as an artist, and I went in to help remodel the inside of this big complex, Adobe complex in Santa Fe. And it had been occupied up until around 1973, 2 years before I got there, by the I Am people, the I Am Temple. The I Am cult was founded by Guy and Edna Ballard in the 1930s, and they combined theosophy with something that we call New Thought, the New Thought religions from the 19th century. And New Thought basically taught that if you keep your mind perfect, things will happen to you, like health and wealth and connections, and magically the universe will bring stuff to you. That book, The Secret, that was very popular not long ago, was based totally on New Thought. The Course in Miracles, which you've probably heard about in your culty travels here, it was published in 1975 by Helen Schuckman and Bill Thetford. They kind of combined in writing it, although that Helen was the channel for the voice, which was supposed to be Jesus in the Course in Miracles. That is completely New Thought in terms of how it presents itself. The whole idea of the holy instant and the perfection of God, and evil doesn't exist, time doesn't exist, only the perfection of God exists. So the Ballards combined this New Thought concept with the Theosophy concept. So they channeled a bunch of ascended masters, including Jesus and Buddha and Saint Germain and a bunch of others. And I met the I Amers in Santa Fe as a result of knowing this place that I was helping to remodel. Now, this place is painted all white. It was a white adobe complex. Inside, every room was pink from before it was being remodeled, floor, ceiling, walls, and everything. Every tool handle that was there was painted purple. These colors had tremendous cosmic and occult meaning to the I Amers. Pink was the color of love, purple the color of protection and cleansing, white the intelligence, it was the pure light, yellow the cosmic ray of intelligence, and so forth. And they would wear a color every day of the week that was appropriate to the particular vibration. So on every Saturday, you would see them wear purple, for instance. The I Am people, something purple or violet. I got intrigued with it, and I started reading all the I Am books. One of the older members that was in it from the very beginning almost, she lent them to me. And I started, when I traveled back east, I visited the Agni Yoga Society in New York, which is at 107th and Riverside, and I got to know them, and I started reading those books. I also met friends in Santa Fe that was part of this group called the Church Universal and Triumphant, headed by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. It's also called Summit Lighthouse. And the Summit Lighthouse was claiming, my friends told me, to combine the I Am teachings with the Agni Yoga teachings. And I was already into them, so I was kind of already into the group. The only difference was that the Roricks had been dead and the Ballards had been dead, but Elizabeth Clare Prophet was alive. She was a living channel to these ascended masters.
Let's take a break from the cultiverse. Here's a word from our sponsors. Some days your brain just needs a vacation your wallet can actually handle. That's why I love IntoCloud. Whether it's answering endless emails or juggling daily chaos with the kids, you deserve a better way to unwind. IntoCloud serves up federally legal THC products that are all Farm Bill compliant and third-party tested, so you get smooth relief without driving across town to a dispensary. So, if you're 21 or older, head to indocloud.co and use code CULTY to get 25% off your first order plus free shipping. That's indocloud.co, code CULTY, 25% off, free shipping. I take it sometimes just when I want to chill. Sometimes I take it before I go to the gym. Gets me deeper in my lifts, blocks those cannabinoid receptors. Know what I'm saying? No sketchy loopholes, just easy, legit chill for grown-ups. Over 50,000 people already trust IntoCloud to upgrade their downtime because feeling good should also be hassle-free. Take a break that feels as relaxing as it is legal. Whether you're chasing deeper sleep, better focus, or just some peace between your streaming marathons, this is how adults get elevated now. If you're 21 or older, now's your chance to float above the stress because IntoCloud is giving all new customers 25% off their first order plus free shipping. Just use code CULTY or click the link in the show notes to claim your discount. That's indocloud.co, indacloud.co. Use code CULTY for free shipping plus 25% off your first order. Fill out their quick survey when you order to support this show and make your week way more enjoyable. All thanks to IntoCloud.
Guess what happened this week? I saw a little brown leaf fall from the tree in my backyard, and I said to myself, yes, Sarah, fall is here. You know what that means? I can start updating my wardrobe with some Quince essentials. Yes, Quince makes it ridiculously easy to stay polished, cozy, and save money without ever skimping on quality. I'm obsessed with their fall essentials. Think 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters starting at just $50, perfectly tailored denim, and washable silk tops and skirts that make getting dressed effortless. My personal favorite this season? It's kind of hard to choose. I'm loving all the leather jackets and the denim. So many things are in my cart right now. Don't get me started on their wool coats, specifically designer level style, but at a fraction of the price. And honestly, the craftsmanship rivals pricier brands that I've tried. Quince partners directly with ethical, high-end factories and cuts out the middlemen, so you get these luxury wardrobe updates for way less. If you want to upgrade your fall look in a way that's smart, stylish, and easy, Quince is definitely your move. Treat yourself. You deserve it. Keep it classic and cozy this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/culty for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/culty to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/culty. We're so excited to have Whole Foods Market as a new sponsor because it just makes sense. We're all about good food and healthy choices, so this feels like such a natural fit. And fall is the season where we always end up hosting. Whole Foods Market makes it so easy to pull together a spread that feels special without stressing. For us, frozen pizzas are a go-to, and right now they're 50% off with Prime. And since Halloween is around the corner, I love that all the candy at Whole Foods Market is made without synthetic red dyes, no high fructose corn syrup, and no artificial sweeteners, which obviously is my jam. And the best part, if I'm busy with the podcast, I can just order pickup or delivery and still look like I planned it all out. Make your next fall gathering delicious and memorable with Whole Foods Market. Save 50%. That's right, 50% with Prime on select frozen pizzas through October 28th. Terms apply. Visit your local Whole Foods Market today, in-store or online. Happy fall.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Now let's dive back into the cultiverse.
I just realizing, I would love to do a whole episode with you just on, the history of all these groups and their intersections. I want to make sure we get to the intervention and deprogramming and all that concept. So
Yeah.
Tell me, how long were you in? This is fascinating. Did you meet Elizabeth Clare Prophet?
I did once, but I went to 3 conferences where I saw her perform channeling, and there were thousands of people at these conferences. They were big. And the first one I went to, I was a little bit overwhelmed. I was new at this thing. I wasn't good at decreeing, which when you decree with a bunch of these devotees, hundreds of them or a dozen of them, it sounds like bees buzzing or an auctioneer that's on steroids. It's a very rapid form of chanting out loud in order to create energy so the ascended masters can use the energy to do whatever it is you're asking the ascended masters to do, like bring healing to something or change the weather or stop the war or, all that kind of good stuff that New Thought people do in their minds and thinking they're affecting the world. So I wasn't really good at the decreeing, but I became what was called a keeper of the flame, and that meant that you studied about 30-some lessons that came in the mail, and then you could be initiated. And so this is how I met Elizabeth Prophet during the second time I was there in 1979. Yeah. Everybody stood in line like you would to receive communion, but she had this amethyst jewel, which was supposed to be loaded with energy. And people would come up and she would initiate you into the Keepers of the Flame by putting this jewel on your forehead. And one person would go, and it would take a couple seconds. My interesting reaction I had to it was that everything went black for me, dark, when that happened. And I was kind of shocked because the person that was in front of me, this woman I knew, saw rainbow lights and all kinds of other stuff happening. So these are subjective states that happen because of the power of suggestion of the group or whatever, and people come up with all kinds of responses. But because deep inside, I've always had this little bit of lingering, like maybe this is wrong, kind of feeling throughout my whole experience with this group for a year and a half. And I kept suppressing it for a while. And so I finally broke away after a lot of struggle, after my first wife divorced me over it. And we had a 2-year-old kid, and I was struggling over now what's going to happen to my future. And I finally had kind of like a spiritual breakthrough of some kind. And I began to doubt the teachings, and I broke away from it toward the end of 1980. When I was struggling with this for over a month, I had panic attacks. I would wake up every night at like 2 a.m. and with stomach cramps, sweating sometimes. That kind of participation in that kind of cult, and maybe it doesn't everyone that I've met to some extent, it cuts into places that are deep inside human yearning for answers about life itself, because it supposedly answers what happens after death and what happens before you're born. You had past lives and you can ascend into heaven if you do all this stuff. And so the existential anxiety is raised quite a bit more than, I grew up Catholic and I never had any of that kind of anxiety as a Catholic, even when I broke away from the church as a college student. That wasn't that difficult. It was more like a drifting away.
Right.
This was like you have a gun to your head because you're thinking The teaching said that if you go into the teaching and you betray it and you leave the path, it could take you 10,000 lifetimes before you ever get a chance like that again.
Wow.
So there was this kind of metaphysical gun to the head. It's kind of like joining the mafia. If you're in it and you leave, you better watch your back, in a more concrete sense. This is in the spiritual sense.
Right.
So everything that you were decreeing against as dark energy, now you've become. You're decreeing against Satan, you're decreeing against communists, you're decreeing against the Council on Foreign Relations, you're decreeing against the Rockefellers, you're decreeing against rock and roll music, you're decreeing against Mick Jagger. I mean, they had all these people. Mick
Jagger?
Yeah, they decreed against Mick Jagger, yeah.
I would have lost me there.
I mean, think about Sympathy for the Devil, his song. Yeah, they had a list of about 500 or more people they would decree against, that were out there. Mostly liberals. They were very conservative. 95% of them at the time voted Republican, and it was that kind of a group. The I Am group, if you go back, was actually a neo-fascist organization. Its earliest members were the William Dudley Pelley silver shirt members, which were modeled after the brown shirts of the German proto-Nazis. That was back in the late 20s, early 30s in the United States, because the U.S. had some fascist movements, and the I Am came out of that, combining Theosophy, fascism, and New Thought. So I was part of this crazy quasi-political, esoteric occulture, as I call it.
I just find it super interesting that usually these alternative groups are more liberal, traditionally.
The system I was in, I would say, was more, even the word liberal isn't there. They're more totalistic in the sense of militaristic and patriotic toward the nation that they're in.
Yeah, right-wing stuff normally leverages patriotism and religion.
Right, and so there always is the American flag and all of that in this. And for instance, the Agni Yoga group veered back toward communist Russia. Rorsch was rejected from the United States in 1936. He had recruited Henry Wallace, who was Secretary of Agriculture under
FDR, right? He was almost president.
Under FDR.
Yeah.
Well, Wallace ran for president under the Progressive Party. But when he was running, he had broken away from Agni Yoga because he was convinced by someone that Nicholas Rorsch was a fraud and that there was a new channel for those Moria, the master. It gets really crazy. There's several books written on Wallace's involvement with Agni Yoga. But Rorsch himself was spreading esoteric nonsense, but this idea that he was selected by these ascended masters, and in the Altai Himalaya region was where the temples were located or whatever, and that he was representing this energy that would kind of make him king of the world, Nicholas, as opposed to Elizabeth Prophet, my old cult guru. She was the mother of the universe. That was one of her titles. So you're dealing with hierarchy and government from God down, which translates always to a form of fascism, because there's no separation of church and state in that kind of a system.
If you were to put Elizabeth Prophet and Amy Carlson in a room together, who do you think would win the title of Mother God or the Mother Prophet of the earth?
Well, just in terms of numbers and impact, Elizabeth Prophet, because, she had, when I was involved, probably around 25,000 followers. This is before internet. And they bought the Forbes Ranch up in Montana to set up their system in the 1980s. And, they paid quite a few million for that. So they had a bigger brick and mortar organization than these online groups do, which tend to fly off the handle because you don't know who belongs and who doesn't anytime.
Right.
It's hard to count heads when you're online.
And a lot of people just follow like a group, but aren't necessarily followers. Her actual devotees that moved to her to follow her were like less than 20.
Online is 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Clare Prophet has 750 staff members at one time that were beholden to her, living where she lived.
Wow.
Damn.
That's a big army.
It's a queen.
Yeah, and they actually had guns. They had a stash of weapons.
Before we get into like all the other stuff I want to cover with you, just really quickly, where does this lineage of thought, New Thought, esotericism, is this the same like the grandparents of Sharon Gans and school or the secret school that was in, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, there's some relationship to it. A lot of this stuff is it's a tangled mess, and they kind of borrow from each other. For instance, I hear a lot of new groups coming up, and I never heard of them, and then I do a little research because a parent calls me or a husband calls me because their wife is in it or whatever, and I find out that the founder of the group was part of a fourth way cult, earlier on, which means Gurdjieff. Now that opens up a whole world of discussion to me, and I can pretty much predict what this guy's teaching without even reading his book.
Right.
Because I know Gurdjieff so well. I have a whole shelf on Gurdjieff. So there are foundational kind of systems that inspire these newer ones. So Sharon Gant, I don't know, I forget. I've probably read about her, but I forget what she's about right now.
They definitely taught Gurdjieff because we had Spencer Schneider on who was in that school. They called it school, and it was secret, and they studied Gurdjieff and esoteric. It was a secret esoteric school. So I'm sure she took from, we'd have to do like a big map and draw strings to all, like you said, it's a tangled mess.
I had a map like that once. I did a big map for myself when I was first researching all this back in the early 1980s, and I had all these lines and connections of like 200 groups and teachers and whatever, just from my own head. But there's always some source person. Like Rudolf Steiner has influenced a whole lot of groups. The anthroposophy and biodynamic farming and eurythmy and poetry and dance and a lot of it. So Steiner's like one of the seminal 20th century person like Gurdjieff. Or Agni Yoga isn't known well in the United States. In fact, a lot of the researchers, academics that study new religions never mentioned Agni Yoga until the 1990s. Yet there's over 3 million Agni Yogis in Russia alone. It's one of the most successful of the Theosophical sects.
What's the main principle of Agni Yoga that makes it different?
Well, it's a system of living ethics, they call it, but basically Helena Roach channeled these vague, cloudy, esoteric teachings from Moria, her teacher. And the idea is to collect psychic energy to make yourself more spiritually aware. And you can do that by, for instance, having pine trees in your yard. You can do that by living in the best places, by being in refined culture, like going to an opera or a concert of classical music, being around the fine arts. And Nicholas Roach was a painter, and he was quite good. He wasn't great, but he was good. So there's this highbrow elitism that's in Agni Yoga, and it's a rare few people that can grasp what all those teachings are. So it's elitist in the sense of the Gnostics taught that there were 3 layers of people since 2,000 years ago. There's the pneumatics, which are the knowing people that have the spark of God within them that automatically know they are part of the divine. Then there's these people that are called psychics in the Greek word, which have a soul, but haven't developed enough to be pneumatics, the ones who really know. And so that's a little more of the population. The vast majority of human beings in those kinds of systems, the Gnostics called hylics, which literally means mud people. They are of the earth, they have no divine spark, and you really shouldn't even worry about them. They're just going to go like the Bible says, you were born of dirt, you're going to go back to dirt. So they're not worth even teaching, and that means like me now, I'm a rebel, I'm dirt to them. So that's kind of what you get into when you get into Theosophy. They're very selective, kind of paranoid about evil entering their midst. So they do a lot of screening, but there's a little of that in Freemasonry as well, esoteric Freemasonry, the speculative form of it. Most Freemasons aren't into that, but there are a core of them that are into this higher knowledge, like Theosophy. That's part of Freemasonry that was born out of Rosicrucianism that came a little earlier. It gets a little nuts and crazy, and you can get into these esoteric weeds. I'm used to talking about this.
Gee, I can't believe we're 5 years in and haven't done one on Freemasonry yet.
But we will. Yeah. We will.
Or the Rosicrucians. The Rosicrucians are fascinating. I could do a whole episode on them with you if you want.
Even cult podcasts need sponsors. Check out these must-haves. Anybody else feel their anxiety spike when you hear the question, "What's for dinner?" and you haven't planned anything? This is like a daily problem. Not anymore, though. Thank you, Hungry Root, not only for being our sponsor, but for sending us a box of groceries and for changing our lives. Hungry Root fills your cart with personalized groceries and recipes based on a quick quiz, and it gets smarter every time you order. We're talking over 15,000 recipes, many of them ready in 15 minutes or less. Hello. Plus snacks, sweets, smoothies, even supplements. Whether you're gluten-free, dairy-free, high protein, high maintenance, or just hungry and cranky, or hangry as they say, they've got you. And because everything is high quality and screened screened for junk ingredients, you can feel good about what you're feeding the family. Hungry Root saves you tons of money too. Less food waste, fewer impulse buys, and way fewer last-minute takeout bills. The Hungry Root experience has completely changed how we do food in our household. Thank you, Hungry Root, for being our new sponsor. And please do take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box. Plus, get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/culty and use code culty. That's hungryroot.com/culty, code culty to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/culty, code culty. You know that first crisp fall morning when you break out the oversized sweaters and pretend you're starring in your own coffee commercial? Yeah, it's a vibe. Okay, but here's the real secret. The best part of fall is what's underneath. Me Undies. Thank you for sponsoring this podcast, Me Undies. Their micromodal fabric is basically like a cozy little hug for your butt. Lightweight, breathable, and perfect for layering season. And this year, their Halloween collection is everything. I'm talking spiderweb all over lace. Yes, it's as gorgeous as it sounds. And glow-in-the-dark undies that are somehow spooky and sexy. With over 20 styles and 100 colors and prints, there's literally a cut for every butt. Plus, MeUndies are sustainably made, unbelievably soft, and backed by 90,000 five-star reviews. Fall is officially better from the bottom up. I love my lace full bottom panties, sexy but also practical. I wear those under my shorter dresses, and I gotta say, I love my husband in his MeUndies boxers. Very soft and hugs everything in all the right places, if you know what I mean. Right now, as a listener of our show, you can get cozy and spooky for less with deals up to 50% off at MeUndies.com/culty and enter the promo code culty. That's MeUndies.com/culty, promo code culty for 50% off. MeUndies, comfort that's made for fall.
The world is full of tours. But you don't choose a Toyota truck to follow the beaten path. You choose it to find the places in between. The detours, where each adventure pulls you toward the next. And wrong turns turn out right. So why would you ever take a tour when you could take a detour? Toyota Trucks.
Thank you, sponsors. We couldn't do it without you. Now let's get back to the show. So you leave this group. You were able to get through the stress of leaving. When did you get involved in helping people, and then how did you become an interventionist?
That happened almost immediately, and it was by accident. I wasn't looking to do that. People in the cult and Church Universal and Triumphant began to ask why I quit toward the end of 1980. And a couple of them that recruited me in Albuquerque, this couple had been in for 5 years. They invested a lot of their money into this teaching center there. They were really dedicated, but they had some problems because there's an awful lot of self-centeredness in these kinds of groups, because it's all about self-realization and self-advancement and enlightened self-interest. And they use these words. And so you're constantly worried about the self being ascended into heaven. And you got to worry about evil getting into your mind, into your aura, into your connections. You know, if you can't drink alcohol because you'll get an alcohol entity. You can't smoke cigarettes because you'll get the entity called nicotine. You can't wear the wrong color like black because that energy will drain you of life. You can't wear silver in that kind of system in Church Universal because it's negative energy, gray energy. Where you wear gold, it's positive energy. So you're constantly surrounded by this tension, and you're worried about the self. It's so exaggerated that you become selfish in a sense, and you become hypercritical because of that. It's like somebody that meditates a lot, they become hypersensitive to their environment, and they become irritated very quickly when they're not meditating because of this over-exaggeration of that sense of whatever that is in meditation.
Yeah, self-indulgence.
It's a self-indulgence. And you want to be pure. And of course, the world is messy and noisy and kind of crude, and that irritates people that are pure. So the same thing happens in this Theosophy. So they had these irritations, my friends, and they asked me to talk to them why I quit. So I went. After about 4 hours, they were out of the group because I laid out that these ascended masters aren't real, and I showed how I was able to demonstrate that to myself. I know a lot more about that by all the research I've done, but even then I could explain it enough for people to understand. So several people left the group because I left. They trusted my information, and they had to go through their own recovery. But this is how I really got into exit counseling. I was a portrait artist at a mall in Santa Fe over the Christmas season from Thanksgiving through New Year's. And as I was setting up, this 19-year-old girl who worked there selling office supplies came up to me and asked me to do her portrait from a picture of her for her fiance. I said, sure, I'll take my time doing it. I'll work on it here and there. And she would come by when I was setting up before the mall opened and talk to me. And she started trying to recruit me into her little Bible cult, a Foursquare gospel cult, and I'm listening to her about the Foursquare thing was started by Amy Semple McPherson. Now, Amy Semple McPherson was considered a lady ascended master by the Church Universal and Triumphant I had been in. And of course, both groups used, in terms of biblical information, only the King James Bible, because that was considered to be of God in English as opposed to other translations. But there's a lot of flaws in the King James, which I had discovered in my exit from CUT, or Church Universal. So I'm listening to her trying to recruit me. And then I told her, I had studied the Bible with a different group and a different teacher, and they had a lot of other teachings. And would you like to hear about that? And so we got talking. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I started doing comparative biblical stuff with her here and there because she was curious. I seemed to know a lot more than her preacher did. And her preacher had arranged the marriage between her and this older guy in the group. Ugh. She didn't really like him, but she thought it was of God's whatever
decree.
Then I found out she hadn't talked to her parents in about 6 months. They were in Texas, and she had left college in Albuquerque to join this cult, and they didn't know where she was. So one thing led to another. She left the group. She told me she was going to send the portrait I did of her to her parents. She reconnected with them. And then I was going to go travel around the world. I got this cheap ticket to go standby going to India and wherever I went, Japan, Mexico, that winter. And I was going to leave in January. And I had lost touch with her because I had moved out of my apartment. I was living at this friend of mine's gallery and I had no phone. So I'm pumping gas in my truck, pickup truck, and I hear this person call out my name. It's this saying, Joe, and I looked over and it's her, this young woman, with her parents in a car, and they're leaving Santa Fe to go back to Texas to take her back.
Amazing.
And the father comes running out of the car and he says, you're the guy, you brought our daughter back to us.
Aww.
And
That's
I'm
awesome.
Going, he's hugging me and I'm going, yeah, well, I didn't think anything of it. It was just me talking about my experience with this young woman. And the mother came out and she said, God sent you to my daughter. And I'm thinking, I don't want to hear about God sending me to anybody right now, And so they said, can we do anything? And I said, no. They said, well, at least can we take you out to lunch? And they took me out to lunch. So we had a good talk, and they were Baptists. They were like regular dyed-in-the-wool Christians, normal Christians, and we prayed before lunch and all that stuff. And she got into a much more extreme, totalistic form of that religion. Is what happened. So it was really a matter of degree. And so I never saw or heard from her again after that. But the lessons I learned then, when I go in hindsight, has never changed in exit counseling, whether I did it with somebody being held against their will, or I met them by surprise and they could leave at any time, or there was an arranged meeting where they knew who I was. Over 500 interventions, the vast majority were non-coercive and had nothing to do with anything illegal during my whole career. But all I did was gain rapport with her, let her talk, got to understand and know her, and then asked permission if I could tell her my story, and she wanted to listen. And then because I had some knowledge, she was curious. And over a period of time, which was like 2 weeks in this case, she began to change her mind. So I didn't get her out. She got herself out by rethinking how she viewed the information the group had given her as opposed to what I was offering her that made more sense. So I gave her an opportunity to choose her way out of the group. That's all I did. And that's all I've ever done in interventions. I offer people an opportunity to choose differently.
What would you say your success rate is?
Yeah, everybody asks that, which is a loaded question. It's like asking me, what's the best religion? Everybody asks me that too after a successful intervention. But so the success rate depends on what you're asking about. Did the person talk to me for 3 or 4 days? Well, then it's about 70%.
Right.
If the person left after the first half hour and refused to talk to me, well, then it goes down to, but sometimes they come back. The family can ask them to come back. So in that case, the percentage is a lot lower. But if you wanted to put an overall, I would say better than half, maybe 60% of people that spent at least a day with me would exit the group that they were in.
Or the biggest barrier is just admitting that they might be conned or wrong.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's embarrassed by that.
When you say once you get past that barrier, it gets a little easier?
Well, one of the problems comes in is that just by being introduced to that person by their family or their friend or their therapist or whatever, there's this implication that they're doing something wrong.
Right.
And that they're stupid for choosing what they did. And so to get over that kind of deflection, it takes a bit of rapport. So, I try to tell them about myself, and I don't lie, but I go into the fact that I'm an artist. And I went to Pennsylvania Academy, and nobody dislikes artists. They're not threatening. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert. I'm not, I'm just a fucking artist. So I found that just by using that, it was like the garage door opened a little bit. I could start driving my stuff in. And once they allowed me in their home, so to speak, now I could open up the library in my head and we could start talking.
That's a good metaphor.
But the idea is to gain rapport somehow. And my entry was the art world with a lot of people. In one case, one lady was really depressed and didn't know if she wanted to talk to me. I was in a weird group run by Frederick Lenz, the Zen Master Rama, he was called.
Right. We talked about him with Jonathan Hirsch.
Yeah. So she was a very special case, and she had been bipolar, and she was in a depressive state. So the way I gained rapport with her was again, the art thing. And she said, could I see some of your work? And I said, I didn't bring any because you didn't bring any pictures. And this is before the internet. And so I said, well, I could do a sketch of you if you want to see. So she sat kind of flat face, because she was depressed. She was kind of on a flat affect. And I did a quick sketch of her. I mean, I had done 7,000 sketches from life of people when I was a street artist over a 14-year period. So sketching someone's face was 10 minutes, didn't take that much out of me. And it was presentable enough. And she was right away woke up a little bit and said, well, that's pretty good. And yeah, you can have it. And that broke the ice. And then we got going, and it turned out to be a successful intervention in the end. So you gain rapport however you can, whatever your story is, whatever your talent is. It could be that you write poetry. It could be that you wrote a book, a fiction, or it could be that you and them are interested in the same thing. Like in one case, I was a tennis player in high school. I was number one in my high school team. And one of the clients I had was into tennis, and we talked about tennis for a while, So you do what you got to do to kind of break the tension, because there's always tension when you're introduced in an intervention. It's can be a tough thing to overcome.
Ironically, that's a skill that was taught in a class called rapport in NXIVM.
That's the end of part 1 of our interview with Joe Szimhart. Be sure to come Thursday for part 2.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the wave of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
We hope you're enjoying A Little Bit Culty. If so, please do show us some love. Drop a rating or leave a review. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Even better, send this episode to someone who needs it. Maybe they're in a cult. Maybe they're just a little bit susceptible. Or maybe they just love a good story. Spread the word, spread the love. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production.
Executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound. Our co-creator is Jess Temple Tardy.
Our production coordinator is Leslie Dinsmore.
Writing by Sandra Namoto and social media marketing by Eric Swarzinski and Brooke Keene.
Our theme song, Cultivated, is by the artists John Bryant and Nigel Aslan.
You know how everything's a subscription now? Music, movies, even socks. I swear if
To continue this ad, please upgrade to Premium Plus Platinum.
What? No, anyway, Blue Apron.
This is a pay-per-listen ad. Please confirm your billing.
Oh, that's annoying. At least with the new Blue Apron, there's no subscription needed. Get delicious meals delivered without the weekly plan.
Wait, no subscription?
Keep the flavor. Ditch the subscription. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.